Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A federal judge in California ruled late Thursday President Trump and Elon Musk's mass firings of probationary government workers were illegal, siding with a coalition of labor unions and nonprofit groups. Judge William Alsup ordered the Office of Personnel Management to retract memos directing numerous agencies to fire an estimated total of 200,000 workers and to inform department heads that the OPM has no such authority. But he stopped short of ordering a halt to the firings, leaving that move up to the affected agencies. The news came just as a wave of layoffs was underway at NOAA. That's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Hundreds of probationary workers working on crucial climate and weather projects lost their jobs. It's not clear if Judge Alsup's ruling will lead to the reversal of those or any other firings. In related news, a federal judge in Virginia ruled the Trump administration can fire dozens of CIA and intelligence officers who worked on diversity programs, DEI. Earlier Thursday, the Trump administration announced it's cutting 90% of USAID's overseas contracts and $60 billion in U.S. assistance around the world. The move will terminate funding for critical polio, HIV, malaria, and nutrition programs, among other things. Thousands of USAID workers were given 15 minutes to clear out their desks. Peers and supporters greeted fired workers as they left the building.
I worry about the people that have gone this many days without food, without medicine, without the humanitarian assistance that we promised them.
Talk to the average American. Do they want to see people dying because of assistance cut off? You know, there would have been a very clear and particular way to reform the foreign assistance sector in this country, to reform USAID. And frankly, a lot of people sort of wanted to see that.
The Trump administration canceled a planned FDA meeting of the Federal Vaccine Advisory Committee next month that was set to determine the composition of next season's flu shots. It's the second canceled vaccine panel meeting since Robert F. Kennedy Jr. became Health and Human Services Secretary. To see our interview with a pediatrician in Texas where there's a measles outbreak, go to democracynow.org. Beijing pledged to retaliate after Trump said the U.S. would slap another 10% tariff increase on Chinese goods starting Tuesday, March 4th. Trump also said Thursday 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico will go into effect Tuesday after a one-month pause. Both Canada and Mexico have vowed retaliatory tariffs. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says her government is still in talks with the U.S. in hopes of heading off a trade war.
Sabemos que el presidente Trump We
know President Trump has his way of communicating and setting negotiation timings and joint work. We must think we can reach an agreement.
This comes as European nations slam Trump's 25% tariff threat on European Union goods as irresponsible and blasted Trump's comments Thursday.
I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
Meanwhile, President Trump indicated the UK would be spared from any sort of U.S.-instigated trade war as he met with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at the White House Thursday. We'll have more on that meeting after headlines. During Starmer and Trump's Oval Office meeting, Trump also appeared to soften his stance on Ukraine, saying he has a lot of respect for the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a man he had called a dictator. He also suggested the presence of U.S. workers in Ukraine to exploit rare earth minerals would provide security from Russian troops. Trump was asked about his recent remarks calling Zelensky a dictator.
Mr. President, do you still think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator?
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
President Zelensky is meeting with Trump at the White House today. Hamas is calling on the international community to put pressure on Israel as Gaza ceasefire talks resume in Cairo. And the first phase of the agreement is set to expire Saturday. On Thursday, Israel released, after a delay, the remaining 46 Palestinian prisoners of the latest captive swap. 24 of them were children. This is Nida Abu Salul, mother of one of the released children.
Muhammad has been detained for 420 days. He has spent the second birthday in prison. Please be to God that he was released after all this wait.
In Israel, an internal probe has acknowledged the military's complete failure to prevent Hamas's October 7th attacks, which killed over 1,000 people and saw another 200 taken hostage. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot and killed another Palestinian child. 16-year-old Hamid Mohammed Fadel Nazal was shot near the northern Kokilya checkpoint. Here in the United States, Axios is reporting House Foreign Affairs Chair Brian Mast has instructed Republican committee staff to refer to the West Bank by its Hebrew name Judea and Samaria. It's the latest attempt to deny Palestinians rights in the Israeli-occupied territory. In Turkey, the jailed Kurdish rebel leader Abdullah Öcalan has called on his followers in the PKK, that's the Kurdistan Workers' Party, to lay down arms and dissolve their organization, paving the way for the first ceasefire since a peace process collapsed in 2015. Since 1984, Turkey's waged a counterinsurgency campaign against the PKK in Turkey's Kurdish-dominated southeast region, where fighting has killed more than 40,000 people. Meanwhile, the commander of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces group, which controls northeastern Syria, said Öcalan's directive does not apply to his organization.
This issue is related to the PKK, the issue of laying down arms, and it has nothing to do with us, and it is not directed at us and our forces. But if this operation succeeds, we will also benefit from it, because Turkey has concerns about the PKK, and because of the PKK, Turkey is attacking our regions, and because the PKK will dissolve itself and lay down its arms, then there will be no danger to Turkey, and there will be no excuse to attack our regions.
Turkey's military has repeatedly attacked Kurdish forces in Syria, including the People's Protection Units, or YPG, which Turkey considers part of the PKK. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 11 people were killed, dozens injured after explosions at a mass rally held by the Rwanda-backed M23 group in Bukavu. M23 leaders accused Congolese security forces of orchestrating the attack. Survivors described the chaotic scene.
A plastic bag was thrown in front of us over there. We didn't know what was inside. We were just looking at it. Suddenly, there was an explosion. Poof! We fell to the ground and ran away.
Some 7,000 people have been killed by the escalating violence since January, with hundreds of thousands displaced from their homes. To see our coverage of the DRC, go to democracynow.org. Thailand's deported 40 Uyghur asylum seekers to China, ignoring warnings from human rights groups that they'll likely face torture and imprisonment if returned. The group of asylum seekers fled China, seeking protection in Thailand, where they were instead arrested in 2014 and detained for over a decade. This is UN High Commissioner for Human Rights spokesperson Liz Throssell.
Their deportation violates the principle of non-refoulement, for which there is a complete prohibition in cases where there is a real risk of torture, ill treatment, or other irreparable harm upon their return.
China has been accused of human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims that may amount to crimes against humanity. In news from Europe, Austria's three main centrist parties reached a deal Thursday to form a new ruling coalition without involving the far-right Freedom Party that won Austria's parliamentary elections 5 months ago. Meanwhile, Germany's conservative Christian Democratic Union, which won last Sunday's elections, and the center-left Socialist Democratic Party are launching coalition talks today. The far-right AfD, Alternative for Germany Party, came in second place, but all other parties have ruled out forming a coalition with the AfD. World leaders have agreed to establish a global fund aimed at protecting biodiversity and preventing the worst impacts of nature loss by 2030. The deal by negotiators at the UN Biodiversity Summit in Rome, known as COP16, came after days of marathon negotiations. The deal comes as global wildlife populations have plunged by more than 70% over the last 40 years, largely due to human activity. Questions remain on the establishment of the fund and the commitment from global North nations, which are largely responsible for the worsening climate crisis. Back in the U.S., the House and Senate voted to overturn an EPA rule that would have required oil companies to pay fees for emitting methane, a potent greenhouse gas known as a superpollutant. The measure came as part of 2022's Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, but had not yet gone into effect. The rule was expected to bring in billions of dollars. Elon Musk has called for the cancellation of Verizon's $2.4 billion contract to upgrade the Federal Aviation Administration's air traffic control system, following reports the FAA is close to reassigning the work to Musk's own internet satellite company, Starlink. Last week, Musk shipped about 4,000 Starlink terminals to the FAA. That prompted criticism from many, including Massachusetts Democratic Senator Ed Markey, who said the move, quote, creates an appearance of a conflict of interest. Last month, Trump's transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, announced he'd assigned SpaceX engineers to modernize U.S. air traffic control systems following the deadly crash of an American Airlines flight as it approached Washington, D.C.'s Reagan National Airport. In Iowa, hundreds of protesters took to the Capitol building in Des Moines to defend trans rights as lawmakers passed an unprecedented bill stripping civil rights protections based on gender identity. Iowa State Representative Amy Wickendall, the first transgender woman elected to Iowa's legislature, spoke out against the bill from the House floor.
This bill revokes protections to our jobs, our homes, and our ability to access credit. In other words, it deprives us of our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I bring this up because the purpose of this bill and the purpose of every anti-trans bill is to further erase us from public life and to stigmatize our existence. The sum total of every anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ bill is to make our existence illegal.
A self-described misogynist who's accused by Romanian authorities of human trafficking and rape has arrived in the United States after the Trump administration lifted travel restrictions on him. Andrew Tate, a far-right social media influencer and prominent Trump supporter, returned to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Thursday, along with his brother Tristan, who also faces human trafficking charges in Romania. The pair's return came after Romania's foreign minister told the AP a Trump administration official expressed interest in the brothers' case at the recent Munich Security Conference. Here in New York, 2 men were pronounced dead just hours apart Wednesday at a maximum security prison in Westchester County as a wildcat strike by guards across dozens of prisons in the state continues for a second week. Anthony Douglas, who was 67, and 35-year-old Franklin Dominguez were both found unresponsive in their cells inside the Sing Sing Correctional Facility. Their death comes days after 61-year-old Jonathan Grant was also found dead at another prison where guards have walked off the job. To see our interview on the wildcat strike and what's happening to prisoners inside Attica and other prisons, go to democracynow.org. And consumers across the U.S. are taking part in a 24-hour economic blackout today. The campaign, organized by the People's Union, is urging U.S. customers to refrain from shopping, in particular from major corporations like Amazon and Walmart, in order to, quote, take back control of our economy, government, and future of our country, unquote. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.